So today's topic is how to bring projects that are in trouble back on track, because we all know that projects and programs never have any problems and everything sets out on the perfect path, and there is never any hiccups in our road to produce the perfect project. None of us have ever experienced that or know anyone who's experienced that. So the subjects that we're going to be talking about today are, he says in his best pirate voice, lack of leadership and direction, slow decision making, and lack of planning roadmap. All right, Antoinette and co.
Hey.
Help us understand what this is all about.
So just before we start, let's just take a step back and set the scene. Picture this. It's a multi-million-dollar, multi-year program. It's in trouble. It's been running for 18 months. No value's been delivered. There's no approved business case. It's been running on hundreds of thousands of dollars of seed funding requests. There's a drop dead go live date in place. It's looming in 5 weeks' time. There is no move on this. Some senior leaders have promised the senior stakeholders and they don't want to move the date. No delivery has even been started. There's no design. There's no awareness about what needs to be done. Scope's not clear. There's no vision. There's no roadmap forward. No clarity. Everyone's unhappy. Everyone. Relationships have completely broken down between some of the team and key stakeholders. The program needs to be brought back on track. The sponsors and the Enterprise Program Management Office have brought us in to do just that. It's chaotic. So where do we start? First, breathe. Before we do anything else, we know we're going to have to be hitting the ground running. We're going to have to assess the situation, deal with some priority people issues and pain points. So step one, ensure your role is communicated clearly when you first come in, and then gain intel. Gain intel from the people bringing you in, from the team, from governance, from stakeholders, running retrospectives where you can for learning, and reviewing any of the key documents that might already exist. Step two, make recommendations and socialize to seek agreement. Outline any costs, budget, and changes, time, people changes, and resource needs. Seek agreement or approval as you need to. And step three, make the change. We are action orientated. So we've identified our number one problem. Let's take a closer look. Lack of leadership or direction. So what's going on here? Typically, when we unpack a little bit, it's leaders who aren't engaging. It can be a lot of causes here. They might be too busy. They might consider a low priority. They're not delegating well. They're not clear about where we need to be heading, so are not articulating it. They may just expect people to just know, or they may not understand their role in relation to the program or project. They know they may be sponsors or owners who are just across too many things, so they're deprioritizing, and they may not even be being engaged with in the right ways. It will cause alarm bells for me personally if I hear that sponsors, business owners, senior stakeholders are too busy and haven't been engaged with in terms of, with the project team at all. It's a common example that I can see, and we quite often see it in real time, like meetings are booked, but leaders aren't able to show because they've got other priorities. So it can go on and cause quite a bit of concern. It's a high risk that will cause other problems. It's impactful. It will cause frustration with the team. It'll likely slow decisions. We'll likely see that we're burning through time and money. There's poor stakeholder engagement and a lack of confidence, and definitely a lack of clarity. So what can we do here? Well, there's a few steps that we can do. So step one, we really need a clear, compelling vision. We need to, if one isn't there, we need to help establish one. So often we can use something we call the elevator pitch, which is sort of identifies who we're trying to design or deliver for, what's needed, what the product is, what it provides, and importantly, just helps us provide some clarity to get that nice, clear, succinct vision statement. A compelling vision statement will go a long way to creating clarity, and it's also a really great motivator. So it's a nice, clear thing about where we're heading. So if one doesn't exist, we do have to help create it. It does definitely make the case of we need our decision makers to be involved in this. So we need to find a way to engage them. So step two, engage our leaders. be clear on their role and how we'll work together. We need to understand the direction, letting them know we need to understand the direction and providing leaders the opportunity to share their views of the direction. Facilitate decisions where you need, sessions where you need to. If you're not comfortable facilitating, sort of get additional support to do that, because sometimes you need a sort of step-by-step guide, a really well-facilitated session to get that clear direction out. And so it just enables people to contribute. And step 3, we can help lift governance capability and lead by example. So be clear if any decisions that need to be made and when they need to be made. People generally want to contribute in a significant and meaningful way. Make a decision register and make it visible so that you know and you can be clear about when those decisions are needed, and definitely socialize it consistently. I'd love to hear from Grant in terms of one of our teammates around, what things have you seen here, Grant, that can help?
Well, I guess lack of leadership can be subtle or quite obvious, and it can be from within the program, or it can be from the actual stakeholders. So, I'd say if you're running a program and that program is defined around what you're delivering, but the why is not clear, that's a red flag to me. And I would say bringing stakeholders in to actually talk to the team and explain the why and create that sense of purpose really makes it easier for a program leader to step in and continue that leadership. But you really need the owners of the program itself telling their story.
So let us go to what our next one is. The next one on our list was slow decision-making.
Oh, decision-making. Thank you, Darren. Hey, look, team, this is a really tricky one. And in fact, we saw that through the questions in the first one. It creates waste. It will burn through time and money, and it is painful. So let's have a little look. What's typically going on here? Someone's not making decisions. Maybe they don't know that they need to make decisions. Maybe there's too many decision makers, and quite often there is. Maybe they're not being brought together to make the decision. Or what is really common, and we sort of have touched on, is that they're not prioritizing the decision in a timely enough manner, or maybe they just don't realize the impact of the time. I've seen it slow a program in the tens of millions of dollars to a trickle. I wasn't leading it, but I was involved in it. I've seen it, slow decision-making absolutely impact. And my first inclination, though, is to avoid it. It can be a risk, and if it needs to be, raise it as a risk. And a project I just led for a client, we needed to make some really complex decisions around, impacting revenue, around margin and price and so on. So that was to enable logic that our data scientists would build into the system. So it's all around machine learning. We had a really limited runway to make these decisions in time and able to get the delivery through. So to avoid this, we were really clear up front about what the decisions were. We were also really clear about who could make them, and we validated that. And then when they were needed by. We built this into a stakeholder engagement plan, which is something I absolutely live by. We're really clear about who we need to engage with, who our audience is, what the message is, what the channel, all of those things, and who's best to deliver the message and when. And we made it very visible on our decision register. So as I sort of mentioned, in this case, we had it on a Miro board, and we also had it really clearly as part of our governance engagement. So, and those people that needed to be involved in the decisions, because it was a lot of stakeholders. There was, commercial finance and other a number of other business teams senior leaders had to be involved. So big decisions. So then we planned and we engaged with them. So my first inclination is avoid it. It's something that can be just so impactful. However, I'll move to some steps around what we can do. So ideally, step 1 is that we do establish it as part of the governance. So ideally, we like to be really clear up front who gets to make which decisions on what, where that needs to be multiple decision makers. Be clear that this is a risk, right? So ideally, we want to mitigate it. So the more people involved in the decision, the longer it's going to take. That's just a fact. So just creating the awareness around that. And be mindful of what lead times that you might have. So you constantly need to be planning for it, you know, thinking ahead in terms of the length of time that it might take in terms of, you know, trying to mitigate it. But walking into where it's already a problem, we need to identify the bottlenecks, right? So we need to try and understand the root causes of what's slowing it down, because it may not be immediately obvious. So there's a technique that there's lots of problem solving techniques, but there's a really simple one called the 5 whys problem solving technique. So we just keep asking, you know, why a number of times to get right down to the root cause. For example, decisions are not being made. Why? Because we can't meet with our sponsor. Why? Because they're too busy. Why? Because they're not prioritizing it. Why? Because they don't realize the impact. Why? Because we haven't communicated it. So we get right down to those, what that root cause is, so therefore we can now respond. So in step 3, look, it's big, but where we can, we need to streamline as much of the decision-making as we can, put as much of the decision-making with the team as we can, as possible, be really clear on levels of decision, you know, where we need to escalate decisions, and try to minimize the number of decision makers wherever we can. So someone has to have the captain's call at the end of the day. So if we are delayed, we've got a place to go to. As soon as we decide by committee, we slow things down. So you can try and set response times. You know, we need to make this in 2 weeks, and we clear, or we risk the project, or we risk delivery, or we'll start burning through time and money. So within this as well, we need to educate. We need to educate our governance groups on the decision approach and the need for speed. Ideally, they're inputting, you know, into it, and the why. So if we've had previous pain in the space, you know, share that. You know, this is why we've learned from this. This is what we've learned, and now we just want to make things better. And you know, be clear about what their role in it is. So if we can facilitate things well, you know, around making decisions easier. I know when I've walked into that, you know, that multi-million-dollar problem program where decisions hadn't been made, it was actually a case of needing to bring those decision makers together in a room with a facilitated session to help them to, you know, to make those decisions. So that's one of those things that we were clear about what the outcome of what we needed to achieve, whatever information we had going in there, because it was in this case by committee, very large committee. So, and some large committees, they do like, you know, traditionally they might like other ways of, they like to see options and recommendations, you know, and sometimes in a memo format that they might need in a week or 2 in advance so they can digest it and make decisions. We work around those constraints as we can. But the final step is we do need to track it. We track it in a decisions register. We make it visible, and we watch for any decisions that are delaying our delivery, and we create an action plan to address. So we try to be as vocal as we can about that in a really nice way. It should be reflected in our risks. But yeah, I'd love to hear from the team. Right.
Yeah, this is a problem you see often. I was dealing with this at a client just recently. It actually wasn't a troubled project, but it was an anticipated problem for a new project. Very, very common. Everybody needs to be involved in decisions. It was a known problem. So we actually started off up front with racing and doing that streamlining you were talking about, Antoinette, and had conversation after conversation with all stakeholders and decision makers, and trying to peel back who was absolutely necessary to make decisions and who was empowered, and trying to get those people close to the day-to-day delivery team. And there were some awkward conversations because everybody thought that they should be a decision maker. But at the end of the day, what we really found was there was very few decisions that really needed to be made by a committee, and the vast majority could in fact be made by people close to the program. And when you think about hundreds and hundreds of decisions across a piece of work, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think as project managers or in other roles, kind of where we're kind of leading in delivery, we've got the opportunity to role model this. Sometimes I've seen this as a challenge where the ideal is we want teams to be involved in some of that decision making, and that's a good idea to shift some of the decision making to the team if we've got autonomy in the team. But often when we're starting up a project, there's a long lag before we get the team established. So having the team established and getting them involved earlier can help with that for sure. And I think just making the decisions that need to be made visible. I think Antoinette, you talked about that, but also making it clear what the impact of a delay in a response is going to be. So yeah, that's what I've seen to be effective.
Nice, thanks guys. Let's go to our final topic for today. I'll go down to our little areas. The third one we had was lack of planning / roadmap.
Okay, so let's unpick a little bit, team. What's happening here? So planning, it's a core program and project skill. It's needed in delivery. And I should also clarify too that the tips that we're giving today and things, it's regardless of whether it's a program, a project, any other delivery element. We still have to do the basics well, in terms of, project management. We still have to, or leading delivery, we still have to plan, we still have to manage scope, we still have to manage time, risks and issues, the dollars, we still have to, help lead people and support, making sure it's got the right resourcing and those types of things. So we need to make sure that we are still tracking towards the outcomes and desired goals to deliver value. Is it a lack of plan, or is it the lack of a current plan? So, was it a sort of, an MS project plan that was done once and then never refreshed because it's just administratively, it's just a nightmare and it just got out of control? Regardless of what it is, if there isn't one and you're on the outside, ask for it. If not, we need to create it. So some steps here that we can do to do that. Step one is, if we're coming in, we need to engage our team to understand the work and sequence it. So, getting it out, getting it visible, using, ideally, if we are working remotely, we're using something like a Miro board or a mural board. If we are in the room, then we've got Post-it notes or we're up around a whiteboard. We are getting what's in people's heads out and sequencing it. Step two, is something I absolutely live by. Create a living roadmap. A roadmap that is always on, which means we are constantly, refreshing it over time. I typically like to have one that, captures goals across a timeline. I typically will prefer monthly, aligned to quarters and aligned to financial years if we multi-financial year. And then, within the breakdown of that work, a roadmap is really great in terms of something that's digestible. As a team, we might have another board somewhere else that's got, visual work around. It could be in sprints, it could be an iteration, but it's basically, the breakdown of the work within a shorter time frame. We need to, our team knows best how to get the how, right? So that's where we want to be clear, and we don't want to sort of create so much information in one place that people can't digest it. I also like to include things like leave and public holidays so we can understand capacity. And if we're aligning those goals to the month, then we've got probably a pretty clear outcome. And then by stream, so that, again, it's easily digestible. It's not always easy, but we do need to try and lift ourselves up to see the bigger picture. So think in terms of horizons. It could be the immediate week, it could be a sprint, it could be a month, it could be 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, whatever the right horizon is, but lift ourselves up and sort of look ahead. We won't know exactly how this will look, but if we're thinking ahead, it definitely helps us to stay future focused. And the faster we can get a view around the steps that we need to do to achieve the outcome, the better. So it's definitely a priority activity. As we deliver and achieve milestones, one thing that I've learned is our visual cues are, an ability to celebrate wins. Our visual cues, I turn things green personally, as like green for done as we go, so we can see the work we've done, and then we're focused on what's coming up, and we're constantly refreshing it. And step three, we get feedback. As we're creating the roadmap, we're getting feedback from stakeholders, from team. We adjust it, adapt it, and we make it visible and transparent. So if you're at remote working teams, you've got it on a Miro board. If you're in the office, you've got it really handy and close, and it's front of mind, and it's constantly being refreshed. As you share it, let people know that it's living. Okay, because we always get people go, well, we've got a plan. Why haven't we met the plan? The thing is that things change over time. So it needs to be constantly updated and refreshed, or at least monitored. You know, we're just checking how we're tracking. We're turning things green because we're achieving them, including our goals. Yes. We do respond to change over following a plan. So, you know, in terms of the value of the Agile Manifesto, you know, we all need to be able to respond to change over following a plan. So again, our roadmap is living. It may also need to be in a few formats depending on the audience. So, while now have had remote teams, so I've had a Miro, very visible, very front of mind, with all of our governance and stakeholders being able to have access to that. But also, you know, when it comes to the governance groups, you know, sometimes it's a one-page PowerPoint slide or whatever is the right format. That's sort of a drill down, you know, view. So we do adapt it for the audience as well. Just whatever tools, it's just important to understand where we're heading and being able to articulate that to others. Absolutely crucial. David, something you'd like to add here?
Yeah, it's interesting whether you, depending on who you read, either Benjamin Franklin or Winston Churchill said, failing to plan is planning to fail. So having a plan is important, but yeah, it's about not having everything detailed up front, which we traditionally would have done. And in the late 90s, I was working at the UK Post Office, or Royal Mail as it was then, and our challenge was we were running with Scrum and a bunch of other stuff at the time, and we just got going. We thought this is a wild new frontier. We can just get progress, and it was wonderful. And we just found that we were meandering all over the place. And it was good to come back to some of those basics and to say, actually, no, we do need a plan, but it's a high level plan. This idea of the roadmap, having those sticks in the sand on a quarterly basis or whatever it is, just helps give us that direction. And I think that's what we were missing. So if you ever feel something is meandering and lacking direction, having some high level visibility of direction is important, without getting bogged down in doing too much detailed planning up front.
Yeah, I could talk about this all afternoon, because you see this so often. And just remembering that we're in the context of a program or a project that's already in trouble by the time we get involved for the purposes of this conversation. This is surprisingly often. You will always see this, and it is often in combination with a whole bunch of other things on that problem list. But interestingly, I think sometimes there's heaps and heaps of plans, but not enough planning that's going on. It's often a lack of planning doesn't necessarily mean a lack of plans. Quite often there's heaps of plans, it's the planning that's missing. The roadmap view can really help things. I think that it's quite different. That can be different depending on the situation you're in, but the ability to get a helicopter view and see how the major goals that you're pursuing link together is key. It's often hard when if you first come into a program that's already in trouble, and where this is a problem, you're trying to deal with, you've got alligators everywhere, you're trying to deal with fixing all sorts of things at once, you don't yet understand what's going on. There's an absence of a plan. Everyone wants a plan. They want to see a roadmap, and you don't know enough yet to create it. That's the challenge. But it doesn't have to be because of what you were saying about the living roadmap. You can just start with what you know and just start building out and evolving it. And as you learn, and I think the most important thing about the roadmap isn't the roadmap itself. It's that you're always talking to it. You're always interacting around it. That's what leads your conversations with your stakeholders and your team and so forth. And quite quickly, you'll understand enough to be able to represent that whole initiative fairly well on your roadmap.